بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين نحمده ونشكره على هدايته ونصلي ونسلم على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا بالقاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آله الطاهرين وصحبه المنتجبين.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Sisters and brothers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I would like to take this opportunity and offer my congratulations on the anniversary of the birth of Sayyida Fatimah الزهراء sallallahu alayha. A unique lady that we will spend a little bit of time discussing her character inshallah tonight. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم لعلي بن أبي طالب يا علي لولاك لما كان لفاطمة كفوا على وجه الأرض. Oh Ali, if it wasn't for you, Fatima would not have had another equal on the whole earth. Tonight's discussion somehow ties with the discussion we had last Friday. Last Friday we were talking about al-Banin, the fourth wife of Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullah salam alayhi, and the third after Fatimah al-Zahra. Tonight we will be discussing a little bit the life of Fatimah al-Zahra, the first wife of Amir al-Mu'mineen, and irrespective of the marital relationship, the Fatima in herself as a unique character, but we really don't know much about her. Generally speaking, when it comes to assessment and reading of history, particularly early part of history of Islam, we are challenged by a number of debilitating factors. Number one, there was no, one could say, a consistent writing or keeping record, historical record of early historical figures. This is why we have such a wide gap when it comes to their birth, to their departure, and to major events in their life. This inability of the early historians, which doesn't surprise one when we look at the Jahiliyyah, the Jahili Arab of pre-Islam was not predisposed with the idea of writing a history. They were oral people. So writing wasn't there. When revelation began to, Jibreel brought Quran and revelation began to kind of sequentially appear, the Holy Prophet wanted to make sure that this message is written down. Only he could find 7 or 8 individuals that they could write. The rest, the oral inclination, poetry and so on, was perfect. But writing, hardly anything. Even one qasida, an excellent qasida that was hanged on the Kaaba. That was the sign of somehow adab and the culture of the time. So the inability to write history, it fits with the character of the Jahiliyyah Arab. They were not into writing. So that caused its own problem. When it comes to female characters, second factor, when it comes to female characters, particularly the spiritual, the saintly, we see male-oriented and patriarchal historians tended to marginalize these characters and not found them of interest, particularly when you have a character that challenges the established order, deliberately marginalized it and never talked about it. This is the second one. When it comes to the life of Fatimah al-Zahra, there is a third factor, and that is the sectarian factor, the Shia-Sunni issue. The Sunni scholars, when they began writing history, impartiality and factual writing was not part of, or the goal of writing history. The primary goal was to whitewash what had happened in the past, in the early history of Islam. Because historians begin writing around the end of this first century of Islam. When the limitation or the command of not writing about the life of Ahlul Bayt or any other was removed and lifted. So people began to write something. Around that time, most of these historians began to think, well, there is about 70, 80, 90 years gap between us and the early history that happened in the past. The primary goal was not to search around and see what are the facts and figures and write an impartial historical record, but to whitewash what happened earlier. And within this kind of understanding or sectarian historical writing, two things happened. Ahlul Bayt were marginalized, and those who stood on the opposite side of Ahlul Bayt, they were given ample space. You can see this with the life of Fatimah al-Zahra. We talk in a bit about when she was born and from the moment of her birth, associated with the Holy Prophet until the departure of the Holy Prophet. And yet, when we search Sahih, for example, very few hadith narrated, probably 10, 15 hadith narrated from Fatimah al-Zahra. And yet, hundreds from Aisha, and not to mention Abu Huraira and others that only spent a year and a half to 2 years with the Holy Prophet. So this deliberate giving credence and space to those who opposed Ahlul Bayt became a prominent feature of this early history. Combining these three, it's not surprising that when we want to establish and find something about the life of Fatimah al-Zahra, we see hardly anything in depth available in the history of, unless we go to others. Now, despite all these limitations, in the past at least 50 and 60 years, we begin to notice a turn in the attention of history writers and those who assess history and try to understand history better within our own Muslim community. And the focal point is Fatimah al-Zahra and Zainab Salam. With the advent of what we call the feminist movement, the idea of the feminist movement coming into our country, two modalities were presented to the female society. Either the Western understanding, feminism, that required them to give up on their fundamental principles and follow the leading figures in the Western feminist movement, or go back to the early history of Islam and try to establish major figures within Islam that could act as the role model for these feminist figures in our society, so that these figures would guide them through the complex life that they have to go through. Either you have to go and become similar to the Western feminist, and which primarily cares less about anything else but the lower part of the body, that is the defining factor for them, or go to somebody else that becomes the role model in every aspect of one's life. And this conflict between those who believe that there could be feminism in the East without having to resort to the Western understanding of feminism became very clear in the conference that was organized in Egypt. I think it was middle of 1990s. A sharp clash between what we call Muslim feminists and Western feminists, where the Muslim feminists became critical of the whole analysis of feminism from the Western perspective. That whole issue is not gender and so on. There are a number of issues that we, the Eastern feminists have to deal with. Justice, equity. One of them stood up and facing these Western feminists, she said, we're still suffering from the byproduct of the colonial period that you people left us paralyzed. So with this, there was a turning point, and our scholars began to write. Now we have master dissertation and PhD dissertation about the life of Zahra, the life of Zainab, but not in a traditional sense. Looking at it as a role model, what could Zahra as a figure, not in the historical context, Zahra as a figure can offer and provide for us, male, female, as we stand to deal with the complex reality of our life. This became an issue. But let's begin with a question. Who is Zahra, or what is Zahra? It's very difficult to encapsulate or capture a unique character that we have so much in Islam, particular Shia understanding and Shia language, Shia sources and literature about her, that makes it really difficult to use language to define. Dr. Ali Shariati wasn't that far when he has a book. He gave a lecture in Husseiniya Irshad, I believe, on Fatimah al-Zahra, that was translated or written first as Fatima is Fatima, translated into English. And at the beginning of that book, he says, or at the beginning of the lecture, he said, I looked at this character and I wanted to define her. Should I call her the daughter of the Holy Prophet? Fatima is the daughter of the Holy Prophet. It doesn't give me the image, it doesn't give me the character that it should. Should I say it is the wife of Ali ibn Abi Talib? Still is not Fatima. Should I say it is the mother of Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein? Still is not Fatima. The only way I could define and say it is Fatima defines herself. Fatima is Fatima. It's a complex reality, because when we look at our ahadith, it appears that Fatima was a divine gift that Allah granted humanity by her presence. Not only the role that she plays as the mystical figure. If you go back, there are a number of ahadith and literature that talks the presence of Fatima in pre-creation, the period or the phase of alast, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings the soul of all human being before Allah, to stand before Allah. Alastu birabbikum asks the question, am I not your Lord? Qalu bala. All souls said, yes, you are. At that particular moment, the role of Fatima, the significance of Fatima, everything was presented. So if this is the character that we have, it becomes very difficult for us to define it. Now, Fatimah al-Zahra in our sources doesn't need any introduction. We all, at least in principle, understand the significance, the spirituality, the value that Fatimah al-Zahra has. The acronym given to her, Fatima, Siddiqa, Mubaraka, Tahira, Radiya, Mardiya, Muhaddatha, Zahra, etc., etc. But just before we move on into what we are searching to establish, let us look at it. Underscores the first point, the first challenge that we have when we try to understand early historical characters. When was she born? Three major opinions. The Sunnis, they say Fatima was born 5 years before the proclamation, before birth. At the time when Kaaba was being remodeled, so at that time Fatima was born. Now, I will deal with each of these opinions to see which one is worthwhile, which one is not. The second opinion is the second year of after Hijrah. Again, Sheikh Mufid and a number of other scholars tend to agree on this view that she was born second year after Hijrah. There is a third category, or the third opinion, I would say. Third opinion that says it is the 5th year after Hijrah. And each one brings in various support or cites a number of historical reasons or historical facts to support it. The 5th year before Ba'tha is certainly contrary to a number of factual things. But primarily, it goes back with the idea of trying to make Fatima as old as possible, while trying to make Aisha as young as possible. This is why they say the Holy Prophet married Aisha at the age of 7, and then in Mecca, when she moved to Medina at the age of 9, he married her, which is contrary to even historical facts that the Sunnis are talking about. Now, if you go online and type in, did Aisha marry the Holy Prophet at the age of 7, and so on, you see how many scholars, Sunni scholars, are contradicting this fact. They say, according to the factual evidence, she was 18 at the time of marriage, not 8 or 9. So this concerted effort to make Aisha as young, as beautiful, as desirable, while Fatima as old, as mature, and somehow is part of that sectarian history. And it counters hadith from the Holy Prophet as well as Khadija and others that Fatimah al-Zahra, at least children of Khadija from the Holy Prophet, they were all born after Ba'tha, not before. And there are a number of hadith regarding this, that whether it was a time of Mi'raj or whether it was a specific time that Jibreel came to the Holy Prophet and commanded him that he has to take 14 nights, stay away from Khadija, for 14 nights of fasting and prayer. And then during that last night, some kind of a dish or heavenly food was brought to the Holy Prophet and given to him, so that becomes the source of the conception of Fatima as unique, as separate from anybody else. whether it was during Mi'raj or something given to him separately. This is part of it. It cannot be 5 years after Bi'athah, because then we run into problem. If 5 years after Bi'athah means at the time of Hijrah she was about 8, and at the time of marrying Amir al-Mu'mineen at around 10. Again, that's unlikely. So the 2 years after Bi'athah, that makes her around the age of 12, 13, and fits with the hadith from Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq that Fatimah al-Zahra at the time of martyrdom was 21 years old. So that is the age. These are the three opinions. Her life, what we call historical life, has to be divided into, this is why for contemporary scholars and those who are searching for a role model, this kind of historical narratives are not useful. People would ask, if they are searching for a role model to lead them out of the complexity of their life, does it matter whether she was born 2nd after Hijrah, 5 after Hijrah, or before Hijrah? They are searching for that unique character that we will talk a little bit about her now. Now, they say that her life should be divided into various phases. Her life in Mecca, under Khadija and beyond Khadija, and then Hijrah to Medina, and during Hijrah and until the death of the Holy Prophet, and what happened to her after. If you read any book on whether it's Hayat Fatimah al-Zahra or any other book on history that they talk about Fatimah al-Zahra, they focus primarily on this kind of facts, biographical facts. But today, one of the major challenges modern writers have is not what we call the historical facts or historical documentation. They are searching to distinguish where the historical Fatima ends, and which we call it the textual Fatima, and the legendary Fatima starts. They are searching, they are not looking for the biography of the Holy Prophet. They are looking for that unique voice. Just try to imagine the character. Her rib cage was smashed behind the door. She lost a child. Her father just passed away. The right of her husband was usurped and Fadak was taken away from her. And yet, she became the lonely voice to go to the mosque, Masjid al-Nabi, confront the entire Muslim male population and ask for justice. أفي كتاب الله يا ابن أبي قحافة أن ترث أباك ولا أرث أبي. Where is the justice in this? That you as a male have the right to proclaim the right of inheritance to your father, but you deny that right from me. Tell me where is in your book it talks about this. Not only her own right, by standing up in front of this group of people, remind every one of them. Go and read Khutbat al-Fadakiyya and see how she approaches it. Remind everyone, إِلَّا الْمَوَدَّةَ فِي الْقُرْبَى, that you promised the Holy Prophet and you made an allegiance with the Holy Prophet that after his death you become loving, caring and compassionate to his to Ahlul Bayt. You violated that command. You went back to the Jahiliyyah mindset, what we call the cozy comfort, rather than standing up for justice. By doing that, she confronted the fact that this patriarchal society considered women worthless and their rights to be violated at any time that they want. Searching for this figure. Now, if right of women in society are being trampled upon, they need somebody to imitate and to emulate in their life. Who better than Fatimah? That no matter what struggle that you have, no matter what condition you are going through, what pain you are going through, you still have an obligation to stand up, al-amr bil ma'roof wal nahy anil munkar, to stand up and call for justice. In Shia Islam, particularly the women movement in Shia Islam, not the so-called civilized that immediately drifted towards the Western understanding of feminism. No, those who said, in our history, we can remain Shia, we can remain Muslim, and we can remain adherent to our principles and yet be liberated. Stand up for justice. Don't accept the patriarchal dominance and interpretation of the faith. Force it out. Call for it. They are asking for this critical figure that becomes the link between the Prophet and Imam. What's so unique about this character? Shia without Imamah means nothing. And Imamah without Fatimah does not exist. So Fatimah becomes the physical and the spiritual link between prophethood and Imam. No wonder the Holy Prophet says, فاطمة بضعة مني من آذاها فقد آذاني ومن آذاني فقد آذى الله ومن آذى الله فعليه لعنة. And this is not something that we Shia fabricate. During the last few hours of the Fatima's life, Abu Bakr and Umar insisted that they wanted to come and somehow make up what has happened to Fatima and the injustice that they have done to her. Fatima refused. Amir al-Mu'mineen insisted. Fatima refused. The only way Fatima accepted, he said, if you, as my Imam, tell me, I will listen. I would allow it. Ali is the Imam. Fatima submits to the Imam. This is what we need our women to understand. They come in. She turns, as she is lying down, she turns her face away from them. They start apologizing. He says, before you go on, I have one question. What is it? Tell me, did you hear this hadith? فاطمة بضعة مني from the Holy Prophet. It's part of me. من آذاها فقد آذاني ومن آذاني فقد آذى الله ومن آذى الله فعليه لعنة الله. They said yes. She said, then be witness that I'm departing and I'll see you on the day of judgment to remind you of what you have done to me, and I will never forgive you. Now, imagine this scenario. Now bring into the discussion another hadith that again both Shias and Sunnis accepted as mutawatir and worth. Regarding the Imam, man mata wa lam ya'raf imam zamaneh mata mawtatan jahiliyyah. If somebody dies and the Imam of the Asr, his or her Imam of the Asr, is not known or does not recognize, then that death is the Jahili death. I have a question. At the moment that Fatima turned her face away from these two, who was the Imam of Fatima? This hadith applies to Fatima too. Who was the Imam of Fatima? Abu Bakr and Umar, or Abu Bakr, that just Fatima cursed them and said, I'm going to see you on the day of judgment, or the Imam was somebody else? Let's hear it. Khilafah, you can usurp Khilafah, you can do whatever you want. The divine leadership remained with Ali, because Fatima, by standing up and defending her husband, and until last minute proving her point that it is Ali the Imam, not you people. This is something that we really need to establish. If Fatima is one of the pure 14 infallibles, created from Muhammadan light, the light of the Holy Prophet, as the hadith says, there is a hadith from the Holy Prophet, if goodness and virtue was in the form of a person, surely that person would be Fatima. In fact, Fatima would be better than that person. For definitely my daughter Fatima is the best of the creation in terms of descent, honor and nobility. If we were to understand this is the character, then we really need to dig deeper into the character of these individuals, go beyond what we call the historical narrative, and find out what can Fatima offer us, male or female, during this complex time and the challenges that we have. If, as I said, Fatima is the divine gift given to human beings, then we have verses in the Holy Quran, chapters as well as a hadith about this issue. So Shia scholars as well as Muslim scholars are now turning away from what we call the Western modality that presents itself for the female within our society, and focusing in a better understanding of Fatima and Zainab sallallahu. But to do that, we need to go beyond the narrative of history, reread it, understand Fatima the way she is, allow Fatima to speak for herself. As Shariati said, Fatima is Fatima, defines herself. Rather than she was born on such a date, married this person, or had the mother of this. None of these facts, as Shariati says, is Fatima. Yeah, it defines the parameters around Fatima. But that unique character, that in the world, pre-creation, now we have even scholars, Western scholars, writing about this hadith, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the light of Fatima from the light of the Holy Prophet before even Adam and Eve were created. I have the article at home. Anybody wants, I'll send it. And they say, what does that mean about this character? And what role can she play in this life, in the complex life that we have? Naturally, it comes after Fatima Zainab sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's the same thing. But isn't it problematic that we define Fatima in purely historical textual term, and we say born here, moved here, mother died, father married, and then ultimately died, without understanding what was the role of Fatima in life? They are searching for this unique character, and we really need to understand that. We really need to go back to these documents and read them again. What is it when we have a girl or even a child in our household, when the birth of Fatima comes or the demise of Fatima comes, how can we explain Fatima to these kids, to our children, that this character becomes meaningful in their life? In 1996, I was in Canada representing Ayatollah Sistani's office in Montreal. There was a conference organized by Khoja community in Ottawa. And from what I heard, that about Fatimah al-Zahra, a young lady, 14 or 15, stood up and challenged one of the speakers and said, Fatima, the way you describe it to us is a historical figure, belongs to the past, is irrelevant to my life. Fatima becomes irrelevant to my life. Why? Because we kept defining and compartmentalizing Fatima into this birth, marriage, before Hijrah, after Hijrah, Fadakiyah, that's it, and death. The value system that embodied in Fatima, the spirituality of Fatima, the intelligence of Fatima, the knowledge of Fatima, we really know nothing about it. As we talked about last week, about al-Banin and or others. It's lost within this shallow understanding or superficial understanding of history. We really need to go back and start reading Life of Fatima again. Then hopefully Fatima becomes the role model for our daughters, for our women. And as Marhum Imam once said, no, for everyone within our society. That modality is lost. We keep saying, وَلَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ, that they are the best role model. But we really don't know much about them to turn them into role model in our life. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that inshallah one day our children will have a better opportunity. There is a hadith that says around the end of time, sun rises from the west and goes towards the east. It's a metaphorical use of language. Some scholars say the true Islam, with critical thinking approach to Islam, comes from the west, goes to superficial Islam that exists in the east. Now we are beginning to see the signs that our children, our daughters, our sisters are not happy with the traditional classical approach to defining Fatima or any other what we call saintly characters, female saintly characters within Islam. They want more. If we can't provide them, they will search for it themselves. And that could become the beginning, opens the door for our children to have something more useful rather than the classical historical notes. Inshallah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the privilege of being among his their Ahlul Bayt's followers, but particularly Fatimah al-Zahra's followers, inshallah. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.